Hi, it's Jan Howell from YouMakeItSimple.com. In today's DIY tutorial, we're going to go over bookbinding using a sewing machine and applying a fabric strip or an upcycled sweater. A great way to give your traveler's notebook or calendars some unique style and charm. Let's go over a few items and things that you'll need for this project. So you'll need your inner sheets, which can be, this is a printable calendar that I've printed out. It's an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. It can be any size. We're just gonna teach you how to bind it. You can also just use blank pages. I wouldn't go over 10 pieces of paper plus your cardstock backing if you are backing it. So you'll need a piece of cardstock, your inner pages, an extra piece of paper folded in half as a guide, a pair of scissors, a paper cutter, and some paper clips. You can use this type of paper clip or a couple of these paper clips. I'm going to show you how to bind it using a strip of fabric and an upcycled sweater, which is really cute. To keep the fabric from fraying, you'll be needing to apply a strip of heat and bond, a lightweight heat and bond. That's what I've done here. And if you're using a strip of upcycled sweater, you'll need a strip that's cut 8 inches by 1 3/4 inches. So depending on how you want to bind it. And you'll also need an ironing board and an iron. So I have cut a strip of heat and bond 1.5 inches by 8 inches. Place your fabric strip face down, and there's a bumpy side to the heat and bond. We're going to apply that face down, and then use an iron without steam to apply the heat and bond. Just go back and forth a few times to make sure that that is adhering. I've put the cardstock sheet behind, and I'm going to make a template with an extra piece of paper, and I like using a different color than white, then I can really see the contrast in the edge. So I'm going to fold that in half to find the center and lay that on top of the left edge, the left side of the calendar. Paper clip everything in place. Then I'll take it to the sewing machine. You'll want to use a denim needle or a universal needle that is 100 in size, so that makes sure that it will sew through all of this. If your machine doesn't sew through this, which it should, it's not real thick, we're going to use a long stitch, so about a 4 and a straight stitch. We'll back stitch at the front and the end of the seam. So I'm just using white thread. I'm going to place my needle, just take your hand wheel and bring the needle down to make sure you're at the edge of the paper there. And I'm going to back stitch at the beginning. And so take your time. Sewing along at the edge of that template and back stitch. So I haven't sewn the template but I've sewn along the edge, and that's what it'll look on the back side. You can remove your paper clips in the template and cut off your threads. So now that we have the center sewn, just going to simply fold it in half along the crease there of the seam, and take a bowing device that's used for folding, or you can use just a ruler and run that down to get that pressed well. So as you can see, the inner pieces of paper are extending out past the cardstock just a little bit, and we'll trim those off with an X-Acto knife in just a minute. So to apply your fabric outer binding, we're going to remove the heat and bond strip, and it'll feel a little rubbery and plasticky on the inner part of the inner side of the fabric. This will keep it from fraying. So I'm going to first, to get a crease, fold the strip in half lengthwise to make a crease, and just crease it with your finger. And then I will apply my little booklet. Make sure that is centered. You can tell with the outer part if that's lined up, and just simply take your iron and press that in place. Flip it over and do the other side. Take your scissors and trim off the ends. So take a ruler, an X-Acto knife, line up the edge of your cardstock, and simply trim away that piece of paper that's overhanging. And you'll need to probably go over it several times to get all the layers. So you can just use the corner punch to round the corners if you want to. That's optional. So there you have it, a cute bound notebook with fabric. So to bind a booklet using an upcycled sweater, I've cut the strip to 1 3/4 inches, which is a little wider than the fabric strip, by 8 inches. And you'll need to cut the calendar in half. So this is a 8.5 by 11 sheet, so I'm going to cut it down at 5.5 inches. So there are instructions on, if you use this printable calendar, there are instructions of how to print it out. So this is the month of July, so I'm simply just going to fold that together, or if you were just using blank pages, just stack them doubled. And we'll need to do that with our cardstock as well. So cutting it to 5.5. Placing one on the back and one on the front. And this will be our outer cover. So the seam is going to be on the left, so I'm going to pin around the edges so it's secure in place, just making sure that side is lined up. To take this to the sewing machine and sew, line up the edge of the sweater and the paper, and you can see there'll be an overlap here and some extra here. So at the sewing machine, I'm using a straight stitch. I have my stronger needle in, And I'm going to take, instead of 4 inches, I'm going to use about a 3-inch length. My seam allowance is going to be about 3/8 of an inch from the edge. So you want to make sure that your sewing machine's able to handle the thickness. So this is probably about the max for my machine. Back stitching at the end. And that is what it'll look like on the top and the back. Now to sew the other side, I'm going to flip my sweater over so see how it's covering that stitch. I'm just going to fold it as tight so it's taut, and see how much is overlapping here. That's what you want. And we're going to stitch right in the ditch, right next to the fabric. So I'm going to pull that over, align your needle so it's right at the edge of the fabric, and put your needle down. And again, we'll back stitch at the front and at the end of the seam. Take your time to pull it underneath and hold it as you sew. You can stop and start as you need. If your sewing machine has the option to stop when you stop to have the needle down, do that, because that'll keep it in place. Back stitch, take your needle up, that's what it'll look like on that side, and that's what it'll look like on this side. So we were able to catch all of the fabric there, and we'll go get the scissors and trim. I'll show you how to do that. So now that we've sewn front and back, and we have this excess sweater hanging off the edge, just take our scissors, hold your scissors flat, and cut as close to that seam as you can without going into the seam. Just trim away the excess. And you'll want to use a piece of sweater that's felted so it doesn't fray. And then just trim off the edges. Now, to get that so it opens up nicely, and just start folding the sheets back. So we'll just fold, finger press those pages until we get to the center. Such a fun way to bind a notebook, a calendar. What a fun project. Something you don't see every day, something different, something unique, and using my favorite upcycled sweaters. Make sure you subscribe to my channel for upcoming tutorials on crafting and sewing. We'll see you in the next class.